Welcome to another exciting episode of the Pathways to Prevention podcast. In today's episode, we have a very special guest joining us. We're honored to welcome Dr. Crystal Collier, a renowned expert in the field of addiction and brain development. Dr. Collier has dedicated her career to understanding the impact of risky behavior on the brain and helping individuals and families navigate the path to recovery. In this conversation, she's going to share her own inspiring journey and discuss her groundbreaking program, Your Neuro, which empowers parents, educators, and youth with the knowledge to protect and nurture their brain health. So get ready to gain valuable insights and practical tips that you can apply to improve your own well-being and the well-being of those around you. So without further ado, let's dive in to this fascinating discussion. The vision, a world where all people live free of the burden of drug abuse. This is the Drug-Free America Foundation's Pathway to Prevention podcast, where we are committed to developing strategies that prevent drug use and promote sustained recovery. Thank you for not only tuning in, but your continued support and efforts to help make this world a better place. We hope you enjoy this episode. All right, podcast listeners, it's time to get this episode going. I'm excited to welcome Dr. Collier to the episode. And quite frankly, folks, we've been chatting for quite some time because she's an amazing individual. This is going to be a great conversation. So without further ado, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Oh, it's such an honor. I've been listening to you for so long. I'm such a fangirl of this podcast. So it's really cool to be a guest on it.
Oh, man. You're trying to make me blush. Podcast listeners, luckily, this is just audio. But, oh, my goodness. All right. So apparently our paths had crossed a couple years ago in Tampa at the Drug-Free America Foundation's annual summit.
Yes.
Love it. Love it. But there's so much more I don't know about you, even though we've crossed paths before. So for our listeners, do you mind just kind of introducing yourself and sharing a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Dr. Crystal Collier, and from Houston, Texas, although I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And then, of course, my mom married a Texan. And so therefore, I became one. And I've lived in Texas most of my life. But when I was younger, grew up in some dysfunction. By the time I was about 12 years old, my parents were getting a divorce. And we were moving from a little tiny town in Texas to the big city, right, of Houston. And they were having lots of problems. And when we moved, got a great idea that I would take summer school classes to get to know people because I was so anxious and nervous. And as you guys know, that's not the best choice and decision. I met a lot of great kids who were making some really bad decisions. And trying alcohol for the first time, just shy of my 13th birthday. And I loved it. It was amazing. And just sent me on a career of trying every other thing that I could. By the time I was 16, someone else introduced me to cocaine and using it intravenously, which I did for a couple years. Through the whole experience of that, my mom and I moved a lot. And so it was always kind of the new kid, just so struggling with self-worth and esteem and fitting in. And then when I finished high school, I had a counselor who said, you have all these credits. You don't even need to have your senior year. I was a pretty good student, so I went straight into college. And then, of course, I graduated to bigger and better risky behavior. And things just went down very fast. I did 3 semesters. I had a 4.0, like a 3.0, and then a 2.0 and dropped out. I remember I had this chronic gum infection and I looked terrible, and I kept just buying new shampoo to try to get my hair shiny again. And was not as worried about this deteriorating health as I was my grades going down. because that was really what I thought my self-worth was how smart I was. And so when that was all imploding, I had a pretty bad overdose and thank God survived it. So many people don't today. So I just feel really, really lucky. I picked up the 1,000-pound phone and called my mom and asked for help. And so she helped me get into rehab. I went to Charter Hospital in Corpus Christi, and I had a wonderful 28-day, your quintessential rehab experience. It was really fantastic. They served chocolate cake 3 times a day. So that was like the best therapy. And so then moved to Omaha, Nebraska to go to a halfway house up there, which was a really good decision for me. I got away from all the risky places and the risky people that were around. And so after my gap year of going to rehab and then going to a halfway house, I got back into college and started studying. And I was so confused. I was so happy to be in recovery. I didn't understand why this cute, smart, great kid made such terrible decisions. So I started studying everything I could get my hands on. And it was kind of a cool time to go to school because all those fMRI studies were being published because that technology was now inexpensive enough to use in research. So I started really learning about addiction and how it affects the brain and just kept going and going and going. And then, got my bachelor's and master's, and I started putting these things in presentations, and people were so responsive to learning about it. So then in 2008, high school here in Houston approached me and said, we cannot figure out on the national registry, which is no more anymore, but the national registry, they were looking and we can't figure out what program to use, and they're all so expensive and we don't understand. Will you create something from us? We love your presentations. The students love that. I thought, what a great idea. And so I decided to go back to school and do my dissertation on it. And so I created a prevention program teaching the neurodevelopmental effects of high-risk behavior to kids. So instead of your brain on drugs as a fried egg, we show fMRIs and PET scans and all kinds of wonderful brain research about a variety of risky behavior. So that's really my story in a quick capsule. I've been sober since February 3rd, 89, proud sponsor, proud, person in recovery, and feel very lucky that I call it my safety sandwich. I have a sponsor. I sponsor people really in the deal and take it very seriously and really want to spread the message to kids out there everywhere about how these things affect their development.
So many questions are coming to mind, but first, thank you for sharing your story, your journey to recovery with the world on this podcast. And I hope that listeners hear it and hear that hope. And I don't know if you ever tag this word on it, but I feel like you got this sense of empowerment and freedom that comes from your recovery, your journey.
It really does. I've done, there's one particular presentation. It's my base neuroscience of high-risk behavior. I have probably given that presentation 500 times, and it feels like the first time every time I do it. So to me, I know that is some divine energy that really has pointed me in the direction of what purpose is.
I'm just going to share some of my story and just get your feedback on it since I've got you as a captive audience here. And actually preparing for this episode, I was at the Houston Chronicle. I found where you were kind of sharing some of your story, and 2 lines kind of jumped out at me and really resonated with me in that they were surviving these things, your childhood, your life, your challenges, your addiction was a blessing, but early recovery was filled with shame, not understanding why I had led myself down such a self-destructive path. And then learning how my genes sped up the addiction process and how substances arrested my brain development. Those just jumped out at me so much.
Those are great.
Yeah. And as you got curious and began to dig in and do your research and study the brain and addiction, what were some of the things that you learned as you look back at sort of your journey?
The thing that I think stuck out the most is I kept looking at these fMRI and PET scan studies and all kinds of research on a variety of risky behavior. And the Time magazine article quite a few years ago had this great picture of this study Volkow had that showed what the frontal lobe looked like with somebody who was intoxicated, somebody who was sober 10 days and then 100 days. And it was amazing to see how the frontal lobe is literally off when we're intoxicated or when we're in detox. And then it slowly starts to turn back on as we heal and in a variety of ways. But it takes, 18 months for it to really turn back on. I remember thinking, oh my God, kids don't have much time. Like we can't afford our frontal lobe to be off while it's growing and developing. Then when I was looking at other studies as they were being published over the years, you could see this same phenomenon in depression, in anxiety, in panic, in people who are struggling with eating disorders, gambling addiction, pornography addiction. And that's when oh my God, okay, I got to make sure that kids have this information so they start to love their brain and want to keep it healthy. And they have a reason to be able to say no instead of just say no. They literally, oh no, this is my brain. I'm not going to hurt it. But then I also wanted to inform parents because my mom read my book when it came out in one weekend. She did. She's an avid reader. She emailed me and said, these were everything that these were all the things I didn't do. And no one taught her all the things she needed to know before raising a kid, right? And how to prevent risky behavior. And so when I gathered all this information, I thought, okay, I've got to equip parents with brain-based information. I want them to become brain savvy, use brain savvy parenting techniques, brain-based interventions. So my book's title is Neuro Whereabouts Guide. And the idea is to know where your child is in their neurodevelopmental stages, what they're capable of, what executive functioning skills are, which is really what our frontal lobe does, how to keep part of the brain on by delaying any kind of risky behavior in kids, but also that they need to know the brain's rule, use it or lose it. And so if you know how the brain's rule works as a parent, you know that those executive functioning skills, if you use them, they grow long networks of connections. If they don't, right? If you do all your problem solving and decision making for your kids, they don't grow neuronal networks for problem solving and decision making, but they do grow neuronal networks for dependency on you to do all for them. So all of this research just kept realizing there's just a few very simple things parents and kids need to know. The brain's rule, what the frontal lobe does, how risky behavior shut the frontal lobe, especially while it's growing and developing. Put all of those into the guide and the program so it's really easy to understand. You can literally see pictures of each one of those risky behavior and how they affect the brain today. And what I hope and what I hear is that it really motivates kids and parents. For parents, it gives them a scientific justification, right, to be their kid's frontal lobe until they grow one of their own. And then for kids, it really gives them a reason a neurobiological reason to say no. So a quick story. My husband and I were going to see a movie here in Houston. We were in the parking lot. This kind of gaggle of kids was walking toward us. And they all put their hand on their forehead and said, frontal lobe. And so that's what I do in elementary school and middle school is we do these fun frontal lobe activities and we act silly and we learn refusal skills. My husband was like, is there a gang approaching us? It freaked him out. But it was these kids that I had been presenting to for years who that's what they remember is I want to protect this part of my brain. It was just such a fun, cool moment once I even realized what was going on.
Oh, that is a fun story. And I would have loved to have been sort of just they say a fly on the wall, but standing over and just seeing this all take place. And we're going to come back. I want to know more about the program, the presentations, the book, both for the kids, but then also the parents. And I love that you mentioned the activities of play and fun. One of our past guests, actually from Norway, has a program about teaching youth how to play. Mm-hmm. Because we lose that and the connection and whatnot that comes out of that. And I'll link to that episode in the show notes. But before we really dig into this curriculum, fun fact, audience members, I've got a newborn baby. It is our first. She's 3 months old. And so I'm taking notes as a parent as well during this conversation. But I kind of want to share a little more about sort of my story in that what helped me reach sobriety was really building healthy coping mechanisms, coping habits, good ones, fitness, discipline, routine, visioning, goal setting. But the longer I have been sober, after probably about that 3-year mark, I was kind of burning out. Like I'm doing all the right stuff, mm-hmm. but I'm not where I think I should be. And, I don't feel happy. It was hard for me to feel joy. I felt like I always had to force laughs. And so I've been digging into learning about and actually going through a new treatment protocol all around, based off on my epigenetics, my DNA markers, but then also my neurotransmitters, hormones, and cortisol. And what we found in the panel was that my serotonin was boom off the charts, but my dopamine, my norepinephrine, my epinephrine were all drastically low. And I began to understand, like, that's why I feel the way I do. Mm-hmm. Okay, I've got science, data that helps me understand it. And then being able to address it and not just, okay, have you tried mindfulness? Yes, I have. Have you tried breath work? Yes, I do breath work. But it's like that missing element. And it brought me that sense of almost empowerment that, oh, okay, now I get it now. I get it.
Let me jump in because you're taking me back to this memory that I had when I was reading Dr. Ken Blum's 1994 article, but I wasn't reading it until like 2013 because published in all these genetics journals. And I didn't read those. I was reading the addiction journals. But he described reward deficiency syndrome and the cascade of neurotransmitters actually produce calm, happy feelings and that joy you're talking about. And so when I kept reading and reading, it was all very complicated words. I had to look up some words to know what they meant. And then at the very end, he gets to this little paragraph that says, this is what it feel like if you don't make enough of these neurotransmitters, hormones, or peptides. You might feel a little uncomfortable in your own skin, have a little anhedonia, not feel as much pleasure in things, and feel a little anxious. And I was like, oh my God, this is what the program says is restless, irritable, and discontented. And there's a reason. And I wept because I'd always thought it was me. Like, I'm defective, I'm broken. Maybe my genes are, but I can do something about that. And that's when I actually started taking methylfolate, which helps my body produce more dopamine, which is my lowest indicator. I got my genetics test read and I was so surprised to see that all of my dopamine markers were down. And then when I realized that, I started thinking, okay, what else can I do to increase healthy dopamine? Smiling, for me, hot yoga with my girlfriends, meetings, and taking really good care of my body so those hormones and peptides can work as normally as they can. I love that you brought that up because it's what I think a lot of people in recovery go through when they finally get into recovery and they return to homeostatic balance. That balance may not feel the same as other people out there in the world. It may not be as satisfying, but there's something we can do about it.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And if you haven't listened to, it's been several months now, where I interviewed Doc Higgins as well. But yeah, it's just fascinating stuff. And listeners, I'll put a link to that one in the show notes as well. But through that deeper understanding, I felt validated and I felt this sense of empowerment. Like, all right, let's get to work.
Yes.
Let's get to work. And I didn't feel that shame, like you were talking about, like feeling just different. Oh, it's just me. That's just the way it is now. That's my new normal. Dare I say that phrase?
Yeah.
And so the whole reason I shared that is I'm drawing a parallel between that same feeling with parents and youth. Now that they better understand things, the science behind it, there's that sense of empowerment to, okay, how can I protect my frontal lobe? Let's just get right into it. We've been chatting for a little bit and give me the spiel. What is Know Your Neuro? Tell me about it.
So Know Your Neuro, brand new website that just published that includes probably about 36 different videos. All of this is based upon the research that I did for my book. So let me go backwards and do a shout out to the Hope and Healing Center here in Houston. It's a nonprofit that was created in partnership by a friend and colleague of mine in recovery, Scott B., who also worked in conjunction with St. Martin's Church here in Houston. They gave me a research fellowship that funded me while I wrote the book, The Neuro Whereabouts Guide. So I got to spend a lot of time doing the research. So I looked at 18 different high-risk behavior and how they affect the brain. And I put a graph for each one of those so that parents could see when do they spike. So you know when you need to have that conversation. And when you realize, oh my God, I have to have that conversation now. What do I say? I've got a script and a checklist. Easy peasy. I really wanted to make it as concise as possible. So no topic spans more than 2 to 4 pages, all in developmental order. So there's an elementary, middle, and high school chapter. In each one of those chapters, the first section is what you can do as a parent to set your child up for success. So for you with a 3-month-old baby, you're focusing on attachment, right? Healthy attachment, eye contact, no screens, lots of carrying on the body, connecting, right? Babies don't know that they're really separate entities until 2, 3, 4, 5 years old when theory of mind really kicks in. So they need us to reflect their moods and emotions and regulate them until they can learn how to self-regulate. Those executive functioning skills start coming up. But that chapter is all about, there's some information about parenting styles, what's the healthiest one, how to achieve that, and then what topics are popping up in elementary school. And so suicide was a really interesting, I realized I have to put that in the elementary chapter because it's happening more and more. Kids are hearing about it. It's scary. Parents always ask me, oh my God, should I talk to my kids about this? Like I don't want to ruin their innocence or introduce them to things too soon. And I always say to them, it's very important that they get introduced to these things through you and not through someone else, a kid at school, or they hear about it on the news. They need you to know how to give that information to them. And you need support, right? So that's really why I wrote that. When COVID hit, the book got published in 2020, right in the middle of COVID. And the cool thing is that I was doing more and more Zooms and Zoominars on the topics in the chapters. And so a couple of schools said, can you just make videos for us? And I thought, oh, dang, I should really do that. And so I created a whole video series for each topic that has a 1-page handout that you can do in class or at home after watching the video. So there's a K-2 series all about building skills, understanding your brain, keeping it strong. Then there's a 3-5 series and a 6-12. So they're very short videos. Even the 6-12, it's like 6 to 8 minutes. And it just really focuses on teaching the neurodevelopmental effects of those behaviors, but also how to increase executive functioning skills. There's also a parent page, a school page, and a student page. In the student page, I have an application for interns, a group of interns who are helping me write the Neuro Whereabouts Guide teen version. And this was so cool because kids read my book, my parenting guide, on their coffee table at home and contact me and say, this is great information, but I want one for me. And that inspired me to create a teen version of it.
I'm digging it. What, in addition to, the teens seeing it and saying, I want one for me, what would have been some other things you've heard from the schools, from parents, from the youth?
So I did the K-2 video series at a local school here in Houston, St. Francis Episcopal School, such a great school. Piloted the K-2 series. I saw kindergartners, first graders, second graders loving to learn about their brain. And so with the help of one of my consultants, Sally Waterfield, who's a first grade teacher, she said, this series would make such a good children's book. And so I got connected to a really great organization here called Spectrum Fusion, which helps kids who are on the autism spectrum find work. And they connected me to an awesome illustrator. Her name's Rachel Joanna, and she illustrated a script that I created for the videos into a children's book. In the children's book, Know Your Neuro, the first one, you get introduced to your brain as a superhero. If your brain were a superhero, it would be called Neuro. And then the rest of the series goes on to let kids go on an adventure with neuro, how to keep the brain strong by setting boundaries and saying no, learning refusal skills and sharing skills, and really fun stuff. And there's coloring book pages for neuro. And so actually the very first book in the series, I was just sharing with you earlier that I uploaded it to Amazon and will be finishing today. So that's very exciting that that'll be coming out. And then a whole series that kids can go on an adventure. And the very last page is a pledge that they get to pledge to keep their brains strong and healthy as they grow and develop, which is a really great start, or executive functioning starter and prevention programming that starts early. And, we were talking about this earlier, Dave, that one of my kind of pet peeves about prevention programming is that it needs to be done consistently to have an effect. And what I saw when I was going to all of these schools is that many schools would purchase a really great, well-researched prevention program, that had randomized control group research, really good things. Spend, anywhere from $20,000 to $60,000, buy all the books, train all their teachers, only to find that in 2 to 4 years, the majority of those teachers were gone and there's no more prevention programming. And now they don't have the money anymore to do that again, or the way that they had to do it with such perfect fidelity didn't fit their population. And so it's one of my irritations about it, because we know prevention works. You and I both have dedicated our career to this, but how do we get people to do it consistently in a way that fits that. And so that's why I really created Know Your Neuro, is to offer that tool.
Rockin'. So tell me a little bit more about how folks are leveraging, utilizing all of your resources, from the books to the videos to your presentations. Where are they plugging what you're offering into their day-to-day lives?
Couple of ways. I do a lot of training. My September and October is usually so busy because now I get to travel more often, going to more states and teaching the neuroscience of risky behavior to teachers and principals. Right now, the Archdiocese of Houston, Galveston, all of the principals of the Catholic schools in this region are doing my book, The Neuro Whereabouts Guide, as a book study. I've also done a parent book study. We'll be putting one online, open soon next year, January. We'll start a brand new series. It'll be on knowyourneuro.org. But the way that they have researched how really good prevention works is literally doing it consistently over the school year. And so there's a video on Know Your Neuro for me that gives you an idea of how to do that. And this is what schools are doing, is they're using it in either homeroom classes or health classes. They could use it every week if they wanted to. There's enough programming and content there, but doing it every other week or maybe once a month, but consistently over time so that kids can hear the same message. Keep your brain on and grow your skills, right? Strong brain, healthy choices. It takes anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes to do one of the classes in the series. And you can choose which ones you think are most relevant. So you may want to talk about alcohol in the high schoolers, or talk about impulse control with the middle schoolers, or eating disorders or technology overuse, depending upon, where you are. You may have a first grade class that really having difficulty with refusal skills or saying no or sharing. So you can use those literally tailored to what is going on in your class. And then for parents, they can go on the website at any time and find information about parenting styles and attachment and a blank behavior content if they're having trouble, what to do. There's a few links to some great resources like Drug Free America and different places where they can get connected to bigger or smaller macro or micro resources that they need in that moment to help with what's going on, either prevention of risky behavior or prevention of continuation of engagement in it.
Okay. So I've got another question for you, and it is, we'll call it a 3-part question. So it'll be the same question, but for 3 different audiences.
Oh, this sounds like very game showy.
Right.
I'm ready.
So youth, schools, and parents are your audiences. Wonder where I came up with those. If you were to give just a message to each of those audiences individually, so first one being youth, around the impacts of learning or not learning, whichever direction you want to go, what would that message be to the youth?
For youth, you are not alone. Learn what your brain does. Connect with other people. Find one person who loves you fiercely and is your cheerleader. And protect your brain.
Okay.
That was probably more than one message.
I didn't hear a period in there, so that's one message. So now, who do you want next? The school staff or parents?
Sure, let's go school.
School, all right. School, what would be your one message to school staff as it relates to the importance of implementing, of sharing this information, or the impacts of not?
So for schools, I would really encourage schools to adopt a mantra strategy. It could be, my program, which is Strong Brain, Healthy Choices. Once you adopt that, everyone's on the same page. They have a scripted message that they say to the kids consistently that is seen in their policies, in their social emotional curriculum, and in their discipline techniques, is to be on the same page, whether they use my program or something else, that it be consistent. Everyone has unity in message.
Okay. And now for the parents. What are you going to tell them?
Oh my gosh. So again, you're not alone. You're not alone. Like there's so many parents out there that feel like they don't know what they're doing. And so I find it such an honor to help them. And when your kids are in danger or you're worried, that's all you can think about. And so, but there are tools to use from day one. You can create a very healthy practice of parenting and a message you build into your family code that your child gets to hear often without lecture, and they get rewarded for upholding. So in my book, I write about the family code and creating a family code, which is really, really simple. One of the dads in one of my groups, him and his family and his sons created this code, and then they put it into a really cool digital coat of arms and framed it. I love that. Another little girl in a different group, she drew this beautiful tree, and everybody in the family got to put their name on a leaf. And the code was right in the middle of the bark, the trunk of the tree. Family code is just a few sentences that say what your family does. And so like family code is in our family. We treat others with kindness, compassion, and respect offline. We protect our brain's development, never use drugs, and only alcohol when we're 21 or over. That really kind of summarizes how you show up in the world. And when you use that code consistently, you're not lecturing. You're saying, this is what we do in our family. We love you. You're a part of this tribe. And this is how we show up in the world, online, offline, and protect our brain. And you're creating unity, which is what really helps kids from engaging in risky behavior, is knowing that somebody loves and cares about them, is interested in them, and will hold them accountable for protecting their brain.
I like it. Family code. One of my favorite books is called The Culture Code, and is at the core of actually culture as a strategy. The presentation you got to see.
Yes.
Like family code. That's going to be my takeaway, I think, from our conversation right now. Good. Fun little tidbit. So as I sit here as a parent, not as a podcast host, I just think about all the questions that I've had since baby Eleanor was born. And I know the importance of protecting her brain. I know the part of my role as a parent is helping shape her critical thinking, which also links to emotions, and also shaping behavior and just overall healthy development. I know all that's so important, and I feel like I'm just now at 40 years old figuring out how to do that for myself. So how in the heck am I supposed to do that for a baby? Talk about feeling overwhelmed. So how can Know Your Neuro help with that sense of overwhelm that I feel?
Oh, so the Neuro Whereabouts Guide and the website, Know Your Neuro, literally age, step-by-step developmental. Here's what to expect, what age your child's growing and developing in, and what you can do at each age to make sure that you are engaging in the healthiest parenting practices possible, and keeping it simple, like learning what secure attachment looks like, learning what authoritative parenting looks like. If you can adopt those two styles in approaching your child, you're going to be a fantastic parent. I actually think you've got many skills that are going to make you personally a fantastic parent. But for the parents out there who are going through what you're going through, learning those early childhood development really is contingent upon what healthy, secure attachment looks like. It's the foundation, kind of the first neurodevelopmental foundational level stage that our brain starts building neuronal connections for. So if you get that one and then go to authoritative parenting and what that looks like, and then continue to grow skills through there as they age. So knowing what's coming online. And in my book, I make it really, really simple. Literally a box that says, okay, here's what to expect at this age. And here's what you can do to increase these skills. And here's what you need to teach them in order for them to know about risky behavior and what your expectation is regarding that. A lot of times parents just make the mistake of thinking they have to have those conversations until later. It's very important that we need to have those before age 8. A lot of those conversations need to happen so soon because kids are inundated with so much information today. And so if I can put another plug into, because I wrote another book that was published this January called Foo Mapping. It's really cool workbook. In my therapy practice as a therapist, I have worked with people in recovery and people not, just people who have family of origin wounds, or society of origin or religion of origin wounds. And I started mapping them about 20 years ago. And so what I do is people will come in and tell me their life story, and I put it into the neurodevelopmental chunks of time. There's about neurodevelopmental stages that I'll work with. And depending upon what happened to them, each neurodevelopmental stage will really create a certain way of thinking, feeling, and behaving in the world. Were adaptations to what was going on in your foo or roo or shoo. But they may not really serve you well today if they were born out of dysfunction. And so I think that one of the best gifts that you could give as a parent is doing your own foo work, really being able to understand, how did my family shape my neurodevelopment? How did my society, my culture, my religion affect how my brain developed, and the resulting thought patterns, feeling patterns, and behavioral patterns? Do those mesh well with my partner that I'm raising a kiddo with, or do we push each other's foo buttons? How does that show up? When you know that, you will really help circumvent installing a foo button in your kiddo. We all do. We all have foo wounds, no matter but how big or small they are is really dependent upon how aware we are of how we are doing that to our kid.
I've been taking some wonderful notes during this conversation. So many notes, and I can't wait to share them with my wife and my friends that are also parents and professional colleagues. I want, though, to kind of dig into, to share with our listeners that are across the globe, not just here in the United States, all this great stuff. How can they access it, learn about it, utilize it, leverage it, implement it? How does that all work?
Oh, I love that you asked that, because learning about the brain is universal, obviously. And so I created Know Your Neuro with a translator, the Google translating button. So you can translate the website into whatever language you're in. Of course, I'm the one who recorded the videos, but you can use a subtitle to hear those. If anybody is interested in re-recording those in their own language, contact me. I would love to give you those scripts. Those are resources that I want the world to have so that you can make this your own culturally diverse of information. What I do, I don't do original research. I love to read everybody else's research, systemic reviews, analyses, and figure out, okay, what's happening in the brain, and give that to the public in a really easy to apply tomorrow way. So I think that this information and the way that you get it you'll be able to apply no matter where you are in the world. And Know Your Neuro is, of course, it's got the translation, but the Neuro Whereabouts Guide is also available in Spanish as well as English. And so it's available on Amazon, either in print form. It's also available on audio book, but I forewarn you, it's a big book. It's 400 pages. So you will listen to me talk for 14 hours straight, but I love Audible, so I had to record it. I'm about to record the food mapping book too. And then but it's also on ebook. So there's lots of ways that you can get it globally if you'd like it. I see a bunch of sales in the UK and in Spain. So I'm hoping for it to travel farther in different parts of the globe, especially now that Know Your Neuro's out and more people will be able to use it in their language.
Marvelous. Yeah, I know where I'm going to go after this. Spend a little time on Know Your Neuro. Absolutely. And listeners, show notes are going to be filled with links, both Know Your Neuro and Crystal's website. And cool, I put your social links in there as well?
Please do, yeah.
All right. And listeners, I hope you're feeling the energy, the passion, the caring that is coming through this conversation. I could ask questions for days, and I've got a couple that I'm going to hold on to for once we hit end record.
Okay.
As we wind down this conversation, I just kind of want to put a bookend, a bow on things with one just takeaway that you would like our listeners to walk away with. We've got listeners again across the globe. So what would be just, your one message, your one takeaway? Could be a call to action, could be a resource, could be a go get them. Yeah. What is your final takeaway for our listeners?
I'll use the quote probably the most often. And it really goes out to parents, caregivers, educators, anybody who works with kiddos, is to be their frontal lobe until they grow their own. Empowering you to teach them skills. Make sure that you offer them a lot of options and use a lot of brain-based praise when you see them using those executive functioning skills, keeping their brain on and healthy. That would be the message.
Beautiful, beautiful. And just so you know, we're going to have many future conversations. But for today, I just want to thank you oh so very much for taking time to chat and connect with me and share your wisdom, your resources, your life experiences with our audience. So thank you very much. It's been an absolute delight and an honor.
Thank you. It's really an honor for me. Like I said, I've been a fan of your podcast for a long, long time, and I love your guests. I always learn something new. So it's been really cool for me to be a part of it.
Together is better. Learning from everybody. That concludes this episode. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and share this episode with a friend before you leave. And we look forward to seeing you on social media because prevention is better together. Together, we are stronger.